dietary tool we have. Yet, in today's world of modern medicine, it has somehow been forgotten, pushed aside in favor of expensive treatments, complex diets, and lifelong prescriptions. We live in a society where the default answer to obesity and type 2 diabetes is to add another pill, another injection, another costly intervention. But what if the answer is not found in more, but in less? What if the most effective solution is free, available to everyone, and rooted in our own biology? I remember one patient who came to me struggling with both obesity and type 2 diabetes. She was taking multiple medications, her blood sugar remained out of control, and her energy levels were at their lowest. Like many others, she believed she was destined to spend the rest of her life managing her disease, not overcoming it. We introduced fasting, short, controlled periods of not eating, into her lifestyle. Within months, her weight dropped significantly, her medications were reduced, and her blood sugar normalized. Eventually, she no longer needed any drugs for diabetes at all. Her story is not an exception. It is a reminder that the human body has an incredible ability to heal when we address the root cause rather than just the symptoms. The central truth is this: insulin is the key. Obesity and type 2 diabetes are not simply calorie problems. They are hormonal problems, specifically problems of too much insulin. And fasting is the missing piece that allows insulin levels to fall, fat burning to restart, and health to be restored. This is the foundation on which lasting weight loss and diabetes reversal must be built. Fasting is not new. It is not a trend, a fad, or some radical modern invention. For thousands of years, fasting was simply a part of human life. Every culture, every religion, and every civilization has used it, not just for spiritual reasons, but because it was natural. Ancient Greeks fasted for clarity of mind. Major religions, from Christianity to Islam to Buddhism, incorporated fasting as a discipline of the body and spirit. Our ancestors, long before any organized tradition, fasted out of necessity. Food was not always available, and the human body adapted by storing energy and then using it when needed. That rhythm of eating and not eating was simply normal. Contrast that with today's world, where fasting has nearly disappeared. We are told never to skip breakfast. We are told to snack between meals. We are told to graze, to eat 6 small meals a day, as though the body cannot go more than a few hours without fuel. This advice has created a culture of constant eating, and it is no surprise that rates of obesity and type 2 diabetes have exploded at the very same time. When the body is constantly supplied with food, it never has a chance to dip into its energy reserves. Insulin stays high, fat storage is locked in place, and the body forgets how to burn its own fuel. Think of it this way: your body has 2 fuel tanks. The first is the one you fill when you eat, glucose and glycogen, short-term energy stored in the liver. The second is your long-term storage tank, body fat. When you eat all the time, you are only ever using the first tank. The second one, the one you actually want to use if you're trying to lose weight, remains untouched. Fasting is simply the switch that allows your body to move from the first tank to the second. Or imagine your body as a storage warehouse. Every day, you bring in new boxes of food energy, and you keep stacking them in the front of the warehouse. If you're always adding more, you never go to the back, where older boxes are stacked high, filling the space. That back section represents your fat stores. To reach them, you have to stop bringing in new boxes. Fasting is that pause, the break that allows your body to walk into the back of the warehouse and finally use up what's been stored for years. This is why fasting is so powerful and yet so simple. It does not add complexity to your life. It takes away. No special foods to buy, no complicated plans to follow, no constant weighing and measuring. It works with your body's natural rhythm. The same rhythm humans lived with for millennia. Only in recent decades have we convinced ourselves that eating nonstop is healthy. And what has been the result? A society where metabolic diseases are now the norm rather than the exception. Fasting brings us back to what is natural. It aligns with how the body was designed to work. Far from being harmful, it is the most intuitive solution. Use what you have before adding more. That's all it is. When framed this way, fasting isn't extreme. It's common sense. It's the reset button our modern culture has ignored, the missing tool that unlocks health by returning us to a pattern our bodies have always known. Insulin is the central player in the story of weight gain and weight loss. Think of it as the body's energy traffic controller. Every time you eat, especially foods rich in sugar and refined carbohydrates, your insulin levels rise. This is not a bad thing in itself. Insulin's job is to move energy into storage, directing glucose into your liver, muscles, and fat cells. The problem comes when insulin is too high for too long. Constant eating, frequent snacking, and a diet filled with processed foods keep insulin chronically elevated. When that happens, the traffic controller never lets energy leave storage. Fat becomes locked away, inaccessible, even though your body is overflowing with it. You can feel hungry and tired while carrying tens of thousands of calories on your body because insulin has trapped it out of reach. Imagine you're at a gas station. Your body has two fuel sources, the quick access tank sugar and glycogen, and the long-term tank body fat. Insulin decides which tank you can use. When insulin is high, you're only allowed to use the quick access tank. It's like driving past a nearly full gas tank on your car, but being forced to stop and refuel every 50 miles because you can't access the main supply. Over time, this creates frustration, weight gain, and energy crashes. You're constantly filling up, but never tapping into the reserves you already have. Or think of the body like a coal plant. Glucose is like kindling, quick to burn but short-lived. Fat is the giant stockpile of coal sitting in storage, enough to power the plant for months. Insulin is the gatekeeper deciding what gets shoveled into the furnace. When insulin is always high, the workers are told, use the kindling, keep adding sticks, never touch the coal. Eventually, the furnace sputters out unless you keep adding more fuel. The coal never gets used, even though it is sitting right there in abundance. This is why the common advice of just eat fewer calories doesn't work for so many people. It assumes the body is a simple math equation, calories in, calories out. But if insulin is high, your body doesn't care that you're eating less. It still refuses to burn fat. You could be in a calorie deficit, yet your energy supply is locked away. You feel deprived, your metabolism slows, and the weight barely moves. Obesity and type 2 diabetes are not conditions of too much food, they are conditions of too much insulin. Now consider what happens when you fast. When you stop eating, insulin naturally falls. There is no constant trigger to keep it elevated. As insulin levels drop, the traffic controller finally opens the gate. The body is allowed to switch fuel sources. Instead of depending on the short-term tank, it begins drawing from the long-term tank, your stored fat. Hunger diminishes, energy improves, and for the first time in years, your body starts burning through the coal pile it has been hoarding. This shift explains why fasting is so effective for both weight loss and diabetes reversal, with lower insulin fat burning restarts. Blood sugar stabilizes because there is less demand for insulin in the first place. The body becomes more sensitive to insulin, meaning the same small amount goes further. It's not about punishing the body by withholding calories. It's about unlocking its ability to use what it already has. When people understand this, the mystery of obesity and type 2 diabetes begins to clear. It's not a lack of willpower or laziness. It's not about counting calories with obsessive precision. It's about a hormonal imbalance, one that modern eating patterns make worse every single day. Fasting works because it corrects that imbalance in the most natural way possible. By lowering insulin, the very hormone that has been standing guard over your fat stores. Once insulin steps aside, the body does what it was always meant to do. It burns energy efficiently, heals itself, and restores balance. The problem was never that you didn't eat the right foods every 2 hours. The problem was that insulin never gave your body a chance to rest. Fasting gives it that chance. And in doing so, it transforms the way your body handles energy. One of the most powerful ways to understand fasting is not through theory or charts, but through the lives of real people who have experienced its impact. I recall a man in his late 60s living with type 2 diabetes for more than 2 decades. At 69 years old, he had resigned himself to a lifetime of insulin injections, pills, and endless doctor visits. Despite all the medications, his blood sugars were uncontrolled, his energy was gone, and his weight had crept up year after year. His doctors told him the same thing over and over: diabetes is chronic and progressive. At best, they could manage the decline. Nothing they tried could reverse it. When we introduced fasting into his life, everything changed. He began with intermittent fasting, skipping breakfast, and eating only 2 meals a day. Over time, he added longer fasts under supervision. Within weeks, his blood sugars began to normalize. The doses of insulin he once relied on were reduced and eliminated entirely. His weight dropped rapidly, and his energy returned in a way he had not felt in decades. By the end of a few months, he was living medication-free. After 20 years of being told there was no hope, his diabetes was gone. Another patient was a woman in her 40s who had tried every diet imaginable. Low-fat, low-carb, calorie-counting, meal replacements. Nothing worked for long. She was told to eat 6 small meals a day to keep her metabolism up, but all it did was keep her hungry and frustrated. She was on the verge of starting insulin for her diabetes when she discovered fasting. At first, the idea terrified her. Skipping meals felt wrong after years of being told it was dangerous. But when she tried it, the results were undeniable. Her cravings diminished, the constant hunger disappeared, and she began to lose weight steadily. Her blood sugars improved so dramatically that she never needed insulin. For her, fasting was not just a method, it was freedom from years of failure. There was also a man in his early 50s who worked in construction, a job that demanded physical strength. He worried that fasting would leave him too weak to perform at work. But when he gave it a chance, he found the opposite. Once his body adapted, his energy actually stabilized. Instead of the highs and crashes that came from constant eating, he felt steady and alert throughout the day. Over 6 months, he lost nearly 60 pounds, came off multiple medications, and told me he felt like he had rolled the clock back 20 years. His coworkers barely recognized him. What stands out in these stories is not just the weight loss, but the rapid improvement in health once insulin levels dropped. These were people who had spent years trapped in a cycle of more medications, more side effects, and more frustration. The standard medical approach told them their conditions could only be managed, never reversed. And yet, when they applied fasting, results came quickly. It wasn't magic. It was simply giving the body the chance to heal by removing the constant stimulation of insulin. Many of my patients describe fasting as the first thing that actually worked. After years of failed attempts, they finally understood why nothing else had lasted. Diets that focused only on calories never addressed the hormonal imbalance at the root of their condition. Exercise alone could not undo the effects of elevated insulin. Medications managed numbers on a chart but did nothing to fix the underlying problem. Fasting, on the other hand, went straight to the source. The emotional shift is often just as profound as the physical one. Patients who once felt hopeless and trapped suddenly rediscover control over their own health. They feel empowered, realizing they are not doomed by their diagnosis or destined for decline. They see their bodies responding quickly and effectively, and with that comes renewed motivation. These stories prove what the science already shows us. Lowering insulin allows the body to tap into stored energy, burn fat, and normalize blood sugar. Medications, while sometimes necessary, cannot do what fasting does naturally. Real people from all walks of life are living proof that fasting is not just theory. It is a practical, effective, and life-changing tool that has the power to reverse years of damage in a matter of months. When people hear fasting, they often think folklore or internet hype, but modern trials have put it under the microscope, and the results are hard to ignore. One randomized clinical trial tested a structured intermittent calorie restriction program in people with type 2 diabetes and found that more than half reached diabetes remission and stayed off medications for at least a year. Nearly 90% reduced or discontinued diabetes drugs during the 3-month intervention. That's not a celebrity testimonial, that's a carefully run study showing real-world outcomes that standard care rarely achieves. Researchers have also pitted intermittent fasting head to head against medications. In a large randomized trial of 405 adults with newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes, a 16-week 5E2 regimen, 2 non-consecutive low intake days per week with meal replacements, produced a bigger average A1C drop at 16 weeks than metformin or empagliflozin. The fasting arm lowered A1C by roughly 1.9 percentage points versus 1.6 and 1.5 in the metformin and SGLT2 inhibitor groups, respectively. Weight, blood pressure, triglycerides, and HDL also improve, suggesting the benefits aren't limited to glucose. The message is simple: lowering insulin demand works, and in this trial it outperformed first-line drugs over the short term. Time, restricted eating, TRE, eating within a daily window, and fasting the rest of the day, offers another angle with solid data. A 6-month randomized trial in adults with type 2 diabetes found TRE led to significantly more weight loss, about 3.6% versus 1.8%, and a greater drop in A1C than standard calorie counting, even without meticulous calorie tracking. That's a crucial practical point. By compressing eating windows, you naturally lower insulin exposure across the day, and the numbers move in the right direction without obsessive tallying. Not every study is identical. Designs vary from alternate day fasting to 5s and 2 plans to daily TRE, but the overall pattern is consistent. Trials and meta-analysis report improved glycemic control, reduced insulin resistance, lower body weight, and meaningful A1C reductions over weeks to months. In some of the largest 5s and 2 trials in people with type 2 diabetes, fasting regimens improved glycemia and cardiometabolic markers and proved feasible to maintain, which matters for long-term success. If you're wondering how this squares with the broader diabetes remission literature, remember that remission is fundamentally about reducing liver fat and pancreatic fat so the body can restore normal insulin signaling. That's why intensive low-energy diets like those in the Diet program also produce remission in a large fraction of participants, nearly half at 1 year in primary care, by sharply cutting insulin demand. Intermittent fasting reaches the same hormonal target from a different direction. Instead of constant restriction, you cycle periods of no intake, drop insulin, mobilize stored energy, and allow the system to reset. The mechanism aligns, the human data align. Safety and supervision are part of the evidence story too. Trials that report the biggest successes also include medication D prescribing protocols to prevent hypoglycemia as insulin needs fall. In the intermittent calorie restriction RCT above, medication doses were frequently reduced or stopped as glucose control improved, a sign the intervention was doing what drugs aim to do, but by removing the underlying driver, chronic hyperinsulinemia. That's why fasting must be done intentionally if you're on glucose lowering medications. The science shows it works, and precisely because it works, doses often need to be adjusted. Put all this together and a clear picture emerges. Obesity and type 2 diabetes are not simply calorie problems. They're disorders of energy handling driven by persistently high insulin. Randomized trials show that structured fasting lowers insulin exposure, unlocks fat burning, reduces A1C, trims weight, and in a significant subset, induces remission. It's logical because it matches human physiology. It's proven because controlled studies in clinics and hospitals replicate the effect. And it's safe when done with basic guidance, especially for those on insulin or sulfonylureas who need medication adjustments as their numbers improve. Intermittent fasting doesn't ask you to buy more, it asks you to strategically do less, and modern science now stands alongside ancient practice to back it up. When you stop eating, the body doesn't panic, it follows a calm, predictable sequence. First comes the ooze, what's on the counter phase. The last meal you ate is digested and absorbed, blood glucose rises gently, insulin does its job, and energy flows to immediate needs. As insulin begins to fall, the signal changes from store to access. This shift is the doorway into fasting physiology. The next hours draw on glycogen, the body's ready to burn pantry stored mainly in the liver. Think of liver glycogen as a few hundred grams of quick access fuel you keep by the stove. It's there for precisely this reason, to maintain blood sugar between meals. As insulin drops and glucagon rises, the liver steadily releases glucose from this pantry to keep your brain and red blood cells supplied. You are not running on fumes. You are running on what you already prepared. Most people have enough glycogen to cover roughly the first day, sometimes less if they're already eating lower carb, sometimes more if they've been carb heavy. During this window, hunger typically arrives in waves like tides and then recedes. Those waves are hormonal pulses, not emergencies, and they pass if you don't feed them. As glycogen runs low, the body opens the warehouse. Fat stores are long-term inventory, dense, stable, and purpose-built for times without incoming food. Lower insulin flips the lock-on hormone, sensitive lipase, and fat cells begin releasing fatty acids and glycerol into the bloodstream. The glycerol becomes a raw ingredient for gluconeogenesis. Your liver turns it into new glucose as needed. The fatty acids head to muscles for fuel and to the liver to be converted into ketones. This is not a crisis pathway, it's the most efficient one. Ketones are clean burning fuel, especially for the brain, which starts to shift from relying almost entirely on glucose to accepting a growing share from ketones. People often describe this phase as clearer thinking and steadier energy, not the fatigue they feared. At the same time, counter-regulatory hormones rise to keep you alert and energized. Adrenaline, norepinephrine increases, improving focus and mobilizing energy from fat. Growth hormone pulses climb several fold, and that matters because growth hormone is protein. Sparing it helps protect lean mass while you burn fat. Glucagon, the hormonal mirror of insulin, nudges the liver to make glucose as needed without overshooting. Thyroid function remains supported because norepinephrine maintains metabolic tone. Rather than turning the thermostat down, your body keeps the furnace hot and simply switches the fuel source from wood kindling as glycogen to the deep coal pile ice fat. This is why fasting does not equal starvation mode. Starvation mode is the adaptive slowdown that often follows chronic continuous calorie restriction, small meals all day, every day with no break. In that model, insulin never truly falls, stress signals build, and the body defends itself by lowering resting metabolic rate. You feel colder, hungrier, and more fatigued, and weight loss stalls. Fasting is different because it is cyclical and hormonal. Insulin falls decisively, counter-regulatory hormones rise, and resting energy expenditure is maintained, even mildly increased in many people. You feel switched on, not shut down, because the engine is being fed from the correct tank. As hours turn to a day and then two, ketone production deepens and becomes smoother. Muscles lean more on fatty acids, the brain leans more on ketones. Glucose needs drop because ketones cover a larger share of brain energy, which further spares both protein and glucose. In this stage, people frequently notice a stable mood and fewer cravings, not because of willpower, but because ghrelin A, the hunger hormone, adapts to the new rhythm and its peaks diminish when meals aren't expected. Leptin sensitivity improves as body fat is mobilized, and insulin sensitivity improves because you're finally emptying the warehouse instead of cramming more boxes into it. Inside cells, cleaning and recycling programs are upregulated. With insulin low and nutrients not constantly arriving, the body prioritizes repair. Mitochondria run cleaner on fat and ketones, oxidative stress moderates, and inflammatory signals quiet. The liver, relieved of round, the clock sugar handling shifts to exporting fat as fuel rather than stockpiling it. The net effect is better metabolic flexibility. The capacity to switch fuels smoothly instead of being locked into sugar, only dependence. Worried about muscle. That's where physiology, not fear, should guide you. When insulin is low, growth hormone is higher, adrenaline is higher, and ketones exert a protein-sparing effect. The body is smart. It does not waste hard-earned muscle when an abundant energy reserve, body fat, is available. Resistance training during fasting further reinforces this signal, directing amino acids where they belong. Protein turnover continues, But the balance favors preservation, not loss, especially when fasting is practiced intermittently and refeeding includes adequate protein. If you map the timeline simply, it looks like this: hours 0 12, finishing the last meal, hours 12-24. Glycogen gradually supplies glucose as insulin continues to fall, hours 24-48. Fat burning and ketone production ramp up, hunger waves flatten. Beyond 48 hours, ketone use is efficient, insulin sensitivity improves, and fat stores contribute the lion's share of fuel. At any point, an eating window pauses the process and refills the pantry. The next fast resumes the same orderly sequence. The system is modular, repeatable, and designed to work with you rather than against you. One of the most overlooked strengths of fasting is its practicality. Unlike complicated diets or expensive medical treatments, fasting is free. There are no subscriptions, no special products, and no exotic supplements. You don't have to buy shakes or bars or carry around pre-portioned containers. You simply stop eating for a time. That simplicity is powerful. It means anyone, anywhere can do it, regardless of income, schedule, or food culture. Think about the alternatives most people are offered. Calorie counting requires weighing food, logging numbers, and fighting constant hunger. Gym memberships promise results but often go unused. And exercise alone cannot overcome a poor diet or elevated insulin. Medications lower blood sugar but don't address the underlying problem. They are taken for life and costs add up year after year. Compare that to fasting, which reduces the need for medications, requires no equipment, and even saves money because you buy and eat less food. It's the rare intervention that both improves health and reduces cost at the same time. Flexibility is another strength. Fasting is not all or nothing. You don't have to fast every day, and you don't have to fast for extreme lengths of time. Some people do well with time, restricted eating, like an eating window of 8 hours each day. Others benefit from longer fasts a few times a week. The structure can be adapted to personal schedules, cultural practices, and family life. You can fast through a workday, then share dinner with your family. You can skip breakfast on busy mornings and focus better because you're not distracted by constant snacking. The point is not to starve yourself, but to create regular breaks from eating, so insulin has a chance to fall and your body can access stored energy. A common objection is people won't do it, but this assumes fasting is harder than it really is. In reality, many people find it easier than traditional dieting because hunger is not constant. When insulin falls, cravings diminish. The endless cycle of snacking breaks, and for the first time, people feel free from food controlling their day. Patients who once struggled with rigid calorie limits or eat every 3 hours, rules often say fasting feels more natural. They don't think about food all day. They focus on life, work, and family, then eat when it's time. I have seen people who once believed they had no discipline succeed once they were given the knowledge of how fasting works. A truck driver who thought long fasts would leave him too drained to work discovered he had more energy on the road when he wasn't eating constantly. A busy mother found fasting easier than cooking 6 separate diet meals because she simply skipped the ones that didn't fit her day. A retiree on multiple medications found he could fast safely with guidance, and within months, his need for those medications disappeared. These are not superhuman individuals, they are ordinary people who succeeded because fasting aligned with how the body naturally functions. Fasting also saves time, which is rarely discussed, but makes a big difference in real life. Preparing fewer meals means less time in the kitchen and less cleanup afterward. Eating less often means fewer grocery trips and fewer moments of what should I eat now? In a culture that often feels too busy, fasting frees up hours each week. Instead of revolving your day around food, you simply eat when the window opens, then get on with your life. The key is reframing fasting not as deprivation but as restoration. You are not doing nothing. You are giving your body the opportunity to heal. You are allowing insulin to fall, fat to be burned, and energy to flow from the reserves your body has been saving. Instead of fighting hunger with constant small meals, you work with your physiology to make hunger manageable and fleeting. Instead of spending more on foods, programs, or pills, you spend less. And instead of committing to a lifetime of treatment, you commit to a lifestyle that restores health. When you strip away the myths and fears, fasting is common sense. You don't fast all the time, you fast some of the time. That's enough to unlock fat stores, reverse insulin resistance, and improve blood sugar. It is flexible, cost-free, and powerful because it addresses the true root of obesity and type 2 diabetes, too much insulin for too long. By practicing fasting, you are not starving your body. You are finally allowing it to use the energy it already has. And that is the path to lasting weight loss, renewed health, and freedom from chronic disease.